Welcome to the virtual celebration of Dr. Marcia Morgan's newly released book, The Silenced Voice, There is Purpose in Pain, Part 2.
Identify that there's discrimination, because we know there's discrimination, race, different types of discrimination around, even just the color of just being black or darker than the usual. So it gives you a better understanding. She narrows it down to the prison, being in a prison, being a black woman in a prison, and also she looks at minority. Yes, she wants to emphasize on being a black woman working in a prison which is dominated by white male and female, but she also looks at the other minorities of this grouping. And as I realized, she's not comfortable then just telling us that we are being discriminated against and we have a voice, but she went further, say, hey, do you want to understand how we feel? So there comes book number 2. And that's why we're here today. She noted in one of her books that, I think it's the first one, that she was criticized as demonizing Black women. And I said no, and I defended her definitely. She's not doing that. She's saying, listen, we are here, we are Black, but I'm not saying you're discriminating against me fully, but try to understand how I feel being Black. So that's what she's doing, not demonizing being Black or being a Black woman, but saying, do you want to know how do I feel to be discriminated against? And she went further. My favorite poem in her second book is "Who Are You?" Because I can emphasize I've been there, and not because It's not about being Black or white. It's about being darker than the rest. I'm in Jamaica, so it's not about being. And we call it brown, the browning. I'm darker than the browning, so I have that challenge wherever I go, even for a promotion. So I have to be fighting against that. So but you wouldn't say it publicly. And that's why I'm saying I'm very proud of Dr. Morgan, because we keep that within ourselves and we smile and we move on to the next application, the next interview. But you would not bravely or point out to say, especially to say something about your workplace. That's a lot of bravery, and I must commend her on that. She's also very passionate, not just to highlight that you've been discriminated against, but she wants to assist other women like herself, both being Black, white, doesn't matter, that she's also been doing counseling at her church. And I've also started our own coaching, career coaching for other women. And I must admit, I was the first one to do the career coaching, and I'm very proud of where I'm at now. Thank you, Dr. Morgan, if you're back on with us. And here I am. Thank you so much.
Okay, Clover, thank you so much for your contribution there. I'm just going to check in. I can't see that Marcia is as yet. Oh, no, here she is. Yes, you're back with us now, Marcia. That's great. Thank you. We kind of lost what you were saying right at the end there. I think we were talking about the purpose of publishing in relation to whether or not you make money and the kind of the broader purpose of it. And yeah, the last bit of it kind of disappeared because I think your connection went down. I don't know whether you can recall what it was that you were saying.
What I was saying was the reason for me publishing the books wasn't about making money. It was about making Black women visible in prison occupational literature. With both my publications, I've had to make a financial contribution to that publication. But because I believe it's really important for us to be visible, and one of my aims and purposes in life is actually to leave a positive legacy for the next generation. So when I'm not here, someone can actually pick that book up, and if they're studying gender studies, there is a book that talks about the Black woman's perspective in the UK, especially in prison occupational literature, because that is missing. At the moment, we still associate prison work to white men, and there are a lot of Black women that work in prisons. There's also a lot of Black women who are academics in the UK. There's also a lot of Black women who want to do studies that look at gender and race issues, but supervisors are uncomfortable supporting those individuals, and then they get persuaded to do other types of research that doesn't fit with what they want to do, and then end up dropping out. So I wanted to produce something that is accessible to everyone, and that can actually inspire and empower people to be academics as well.
Okay, we had a brief shot of Gil there in lots more light. Sounded like a Windows kind of signature theme coming in as well there. Maybe we'll come back to Gil. Okay, just a
I've
final
just
message.
come back. I had a power surge, so.
Okay, yeah. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you and see you loud and clear.
Okay.
Excellent. The light's really good, so we can see you
good.
very well. Excellent. Good stuff. So, Marcia, just a final question to you before I think we go to the Q&A, and that's really about if somebody is here for the first time, encountering you for the first time, having heard about the book, heard about the launch, haven't got it yet, what would be maybe some of the 2 or 3, what would you want them to take away from the book, from the conversation that we're having so far, that might just then encourage them to look into your work further?
Well, I guess you're in a sense asking the question that was part of the competition.
Yes.
So I guess the 3 key messages that I would like everyone to take from tonight would be to be inspired, to stay focused, and to fulfill your purpose. Because through my journey, it's been really important to understand that your purpose doesn't stay the same. It changes throughout your journey. So at the beginning, my purpose was to make Black women visible. Now that I've done that through my first book, my purpose is to inspire others to be able to contribute to knowledge production and theory. Not just share experience, but actually influence policies, influence the literature that young people and students are learning about from our perspective. Because if we don't tell our stories, if we don't contribute to policy, then someone else will theorize about us to our detriment. It's always important to stay focused, because with life, there's so many challenges that we go through. If we're parents, we've got children to look after. If we're in employment, we've got to work. Life just goes on. And sometimes it's quite easy to get distracted by life and then lose sight of our purpose. But if we stay focused, if we prioritize, if we balance our time. So for example, when I was studying, I committed a minimum of 2 hours each day to my studies until I completed it. If you commit yourself even for 1 hour each day, you'd be surprised how many hours you will spend on whatever it is that you are trying to achieve. Fulfilling your purpose, like I've said, it's important to be prepared to identify what that purpose is, and it can be anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be completing a degree or a qualification, but whatever that purpose is, identify it, work with it, and just be prepared to put that effort and hard work into it. So the 3 key messages really is to be inspired, because if I can do it, then anyone can do it. Anyone can have a purpose. Don't measure yourself against somebody else. Just know what your purpose is and stay focused to achieve it.
Okay, sounds like the most appropriate message is to move on to the kind of the Q&A section. So, and in relation to the prize, we're going to come back to that right to the end, because I believe we have a winner of that, and you might want to make an announcement, but we can do that literally before we wrap things up. But what I'd like to do now is to move into the question and answer session, and it is open for anybody. We've got 42 people on the call, so we've got a good audience out there. If you would like to come on camera and unmute your mic, then by all means do that. What might help, and I'm just checking the process here. I don't know whether we've got the raise hands thing. I'm used to Teams much more than Zoom in this context, but just to try and establish some order, or we could just do a free-for-all. But if you've got a question that you'd like to ask either to Marcia or to any of our guests, so Chelsea and Clover and Gil are still here as well, now is your opportunity to be able to do. Raise hands is available. Okay, that's very good. Let me see if I can. Okay, raise hands is available. Somebody might have to explain to me where it is, because I'm trying to find it. I can see reactions, but I can't see raised hands. Let me try somewhere else. Meeting information.
Go to participants.
Sorry, participants. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I should know this stuff, but I don't. So forgive me for that. Right. So if I go to more participants, raise hand. Gotcha. Okay. Yes. So if you go, yeah. If so, it's for anybody out there. If you go to participants, then you've got a raise hand button which you can click, and then that way I'll know that you want to ask a question, and then I can invite you to, if you so choose, to at least unmute your mic, because otherwise we won't be able to hear your question. It would be great to see you, but it's not absolutely obligatory. But yeah, so any questions or comments or observations that anybody wants to make at this stage in the proceedings?
Georgina has asked if I can read my favorite poem.
Okay. Would you like to read your favorite poem?
Yeah, I can read my favorite poem.
Okay, let's do that.
My favorite poem is Who Do You See? And so I'll read it and then I'll say why this is my favorite poem. When you look at me, who do you see? A black girl looking back, she is me. But really, who do you see? Do you see yourself in me? Who am I? Some would say a black woman with an attitude, a chip on her shoulder, a benefit claimer, or possibly a cleaner. But really, who am I? A mother, a doctor of philosophy, a senior manager in HMPPS, a woman leader. I'm whoever I want to be. And so can you be anything you want to be if you don't allow anyone to determine what that might be. What are your aspirations? What do you want to be? On this piece of paper, list all of those things. The reason why that's my favorite poem is because it just reminds me that I can be anything I want to be. And all the way through my life, I've had times where people have told me, this is what you are, or this is what you should be. But really, you can be anything that you want to be. And when I read that poem, it actually inspires me to remind me that, yes, I can be something else. So for example, this book, when I wrote my first poem, was discussed with my supervisor, and I said to her, I want to include poetry in my thesis somewhere. And she said, well, that's not the academic type of writing. You have to focus on the academic side of writing. You can't include poetry. But in the end, I got poetry at the beginning of each of my chapters because I was saying, this is my thesis, this is my research, and I want to include an element of me. And then likewise with the second book, when I approached other publishers and they said, well, no, we don't really do poetry. And I kept saying, but it's not just poetry, it's narrative and analysis. It's a combination of the three. And then Pedoma Press agreed to publish it. But again, it was, you need to understand the concept that I'm trying to get over. It's not poetry and something different. You can use poetry as data. You can use poetry to gather data. You can use poetry to express, improve people's well-being. It has so many ways in which it can help people's lives. And that's why that poem is my favorite, because it reminds me that you can do and you can be anything you want to be.
Okay, that's great. That's a very clear explanation. I'm just scrolling through the list of participants. And
Fitzroy, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Gil, yes, speak to us.
I just wanted to have a word with Dr. Marcia.
Go ahead.
Around the issue of being visible and invisible, because that happens to a lot of us in organizations, especially if you get to a position where you want you to be invisible, you're also invisible. And how do you deal with those sort of things? Because those are some of the things that I had to go through. For those who are here, I got to a position of second in charge of my school. I was associate dean for the Royal Docks Business School, University of East London. And it is a very interesting situation. So how do you deal with the issue of being visible and invisible at the same time?
For me, it was always being reminded that I'm the person who is always remembered. So even if my voice is not heard at the table, if I do something wrong, I'm always remembered. I quickly learned that if you have an important point to make, or you want some kind of change or to do something, it's not necessarily about who sends the message, because quite a lot of the time when I've sat at boardrooms and you try to speak, someone tries to speak over you. And it's quite easy to get caught into that, I'm going to shout the loudest, and then you get labeled as the angry Black woman or the woman with the attitude. But if you find an ally around that table and you get that ally to say what you want them to say, then you then get the outcome that you want. It's always being aware that people will remember you, whether you've done something good or bad. So it's making sure that you're professional and know who you are in the space that you are, but also feel comfortable. So, for example, when I was told that I was too ethnic to go into management, that's when I really became ethnic, whatever that meant, because that was the end of relaxers, for example, because it was my Blackness is going to show and I am going to go into management, because for a start, I don't understand what ethnic means. But secondly, I'm not going to diminish who I am to make someone else feel comfortable. You are going to accept me. And if you don't accept me, then I will move on to the next organization that will accept me. So it's really important to know who you are in the space that you are and be prepared to be visible, even if you feel invisible, because you're always remembered. Because quite a lot of the times I was the only Black woman in
Exactly.
a lot of that I was in.
Yeah, you're the only Black person.
Yeah.
It's interesting, the tactic that you use. And I wonder if that it's because you're a woman. Because in certain cases, the talking over, they're trying to basically pretend you're not there, not responding to what you say. But when a white person then says it, everybody responds to it. And therefore they try to nullify your contribution to the situation. You said you try to develop people who will support you. But in my situation, I did a lot of traveling because one of my responsibilities was to sell university degrees from East London, especially in the Far East, China, Hong Kong, Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, that area of the world. And these people are so surprised when they see a Black person that it is as if, you shouldn't be in that position. And when you start speaking and you start speaking with authority, they become totally, totally shocked, as if sometimes being shocked to silence. And you then have to basically, well, my strategy was, look, I'm here by merit. I am here as a person of African descent. I never describe myself as Black. I describe myself as a descendant of enslaved African. And therefore, one of the things that they then do is recognize that we have been taken away from that table and we are getting back to the table because we've deserved the position of being back at the table. And so whether they liked it or not, I just spoke.
There is something about having the confidence in who you are and the message that you are trying to get across. And that's one of the reasons why I advocate for individuals to get qualifications, because if you want to contribute to a particular area, then you want to contribute with authority, then it's important to have the credentials to support that conversation, because people will see your color first and just make assumptions based on what you look like, rather than understand your character, but also respect the fact that you have something important to contribute. But I think it's very important to understand who you are in the space that you're in, because different spaces needs different ways in which you communicate, in different ways in which you present yourself. So for example, in the workplace, as a Black woman, quite a lot of the time people make assumptions that you are the angry Black woman. But if you are the educated Black woman, people see that more as a threat than if you're angry, because when you're angry, they see that as the stereotype playing out. So one of the tricks that I always use is I will speak very quietly and be very calm and composed regardless of what's going on. And people get lost because they're not expecting that type of reaction. But I'm comfortable doing that because I know I'm a professional. I know I have the right to be there. I know what I'm saying makes sense. And I know my contribution is worthwhile, whether the person wants to accept it or not.
Interesting. Okay, thanks for sharing that.
Yes.
That's right. Through you, through Dr. Morgan. I was just thinking, how do we fix this? And I'm saying maybe we need to emphasize more love in the home, not just the Black home, but also in all homes. And I don't know if we could teach diversity and make it a mandatory in our school. Teaching diversity in a practical way. How do you deal with someone from a different culture, a different skin color, stuff like that? Because I know it's institutional archaic, where it has been inbred over the years. It is like a break in the way we think and the way we see ourselves. And I, as a Black person, I know we discriminate against other races because I've seen a Chinese person and I'm like, they all look the same. Until you finally speak to them and get to know them more, you can make the differentiation. So we also, it is floated right across. And we're on one side speaking, but how do we fix this? So it has to be fixed by each and every one of us. Doesn't matter race, which country we're from, and how poor we are. It doesn't matter.
I was going to say that I think verbalizing it, because we don't actually verbalize the different experiences and the different thought processes that we have to go through. I've never told anyone some of the things that I will think through. Just something like, what am I going to take into work to eat? There's certain things I won't take in because I know that people will jump to conclusions, and it's just simple, small things like that, just verbalizing it, which Marcia has done, I think then raises it, and then it's out there then. So it can then be something that is more tangible, that can be dealt with because people know about it. Don't know.
Can I make a point? Oh, sorry, when you're finished. Fitzroy, can I make a point?
Yeah, go ahead, by all means.
Yeah, my background is human resource management. And I've worked in that field for some 25 years. And since, say in the last 6 months, when George Floyd was murdered, I am doing some work from Jamaica in Canada. And one of the things that I'm looking at is the history of diversity and also the history of unconscious bias. And it's interesting because diversity is a subject, and I'm trying to also give an answer to the question, but I've just got to take a step back to move to come forward. Mm-hmm. One of the interesting things is diversity as a subject matter first came into organization after a study that was done in 1987 called Workforce 2000 in America, where they said there was going to be a shortage of white people in the American job market.
Yeah, I remember.
Now, one of the interesting things is those same people who did that study in 1987 on Workforce 2000 released another study recently called Workforce 2020. Now, one of the things they said was this, that when they released this study in 1987, they had no intention of saying diversity was the solution to the problem of racism in organization. What they were talking about was a shortage of people and how that shortage of people will involve other people coming into the job market. And what they said about their study, look, we were misinterpreted. And for our study of 1987 to bring out the issue of diversity, because diversity doesn't really solve the problem. If you look at what affirmative action is supposed to be about, it's supposed to bridge the gap And as Johnson said, the President Johnson, when you put chains around somebody else's feet and you're running 100 meters, those with the chains around their feet can barely start the race. Now, moving to unconscious bias. Unconscious bias, the people who developed unconscious bias said, and I've taken the unconscious bias test 5 times, and every time I've taken that unconscious bias step, I've come out differently. The first time I did it, I came out in favor of black, then I came out in favor of white, and then black, and then white, and then black again. There's a paper that has been published by the people at Harvard University who did this, develop this test, that look, doing the unconscious bias test once doesn't mean anything. You've got to take it at least 3 or 4 times for it to show something. Yeah? And then you take the aggregate score. So what I'm trying to say here is that these policies that have been developed by organizations to combat racism isn't combating racism. It's just an alibi to maintain white supremacy. There's a book that has been published by a woman by the name of Dr. Gloria Gordon called Towards Bicultural Competence, Beyond Black and White. If you go on the internet, you will see a lot of this book. This book was published first in 2007. Yeah? It's still very, very popular on the internet. It's still costing £37.50 to buy that book off Amazon. This woman is no longer getting any of the royalties of this book, but her book has developed a new way of thinking in America, in Mexico, in New Zealand, in Australia, in Canada. And I'm working with her at the moment in time to see if we can break into the Canadian, basically corporate structure to put across the issues of what Towards Bicultural Competence is about. And in this book, she uses the term also that she is a descendant of enslaved Africans. Because when we label ourselves as Black, especially in the UK, we are labeling ourselves as almost a subnormal or an abnormal culture. If you remember Tony Blair saying a comment when he was leader, he said, it is Black culture that is contributing to the way some people behave in this society. Black culture was developed as part of the process of slavery. And now one of the things that I'm going to stop in a minute, one of the things we should do is get hold of this book. I don't know if you can see it on here, right? You can still get it. It's called Towards Bicultural Competence, Beyond Black and White, and it's written by Dr. Gloria Gordon. Although she's not getting the royalties, it's a book well worth reading. I go as far as to say about this book that in years to come, this book will be one of the books that will still be read when we are long dead and gone. Yeah? And she's about to publish a second book, which is excellent. And so I would recommend that you look at this book. It will give you strength, it will give you courage, it will give you thinking that will make you feel that you can go out there and conquer the world that we live in.
Okay. So I'm going to recommend that people buy that book after or at the same time as they buy Marcia's book as well. But I'm certainly going to go out and look for that book because I'm interested in the things you spoke about. Also, that the unconscious bias test, I think the official name for it is the implicit association test. Is that right?
Yes.
That's Harvard University. So for anybody that's not familiar with that, there's a big conversation going on about unconscious bias, but there is an equal conversation going on about the limitations of unconscious bias.
Yes.
The source of it is the implicit association test. If you look for it on your search engine of choice, whether it's Google or anything else, you'll come to it. It's a test that you can take online. It's free. And I think what you said is just very powerful there, because I think it's really important that I think that we're aware of some of these discussions that are going on. And unconscious bias definitely has that kind of flavor of the month kind of feel to it. So equip yourself with some knowledge about that. As I say, implicit association test is what you look for. I think it was Harvard that developed it. Is that right?
Yes.
People at Harvard University developed that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there was just going back to the chat. There's a couple of comments I wanted to pick up on. Jess Moriarty, I think, was referring to Marcia's earlier comments about poetry as research. and knowledge and experience as well. So just an endorsement for what you were saying there, Marcia. There was another comment here. Georgina says, I prefer the term blackened by a group of delusional grandiose and paranoid psychopaths. I wonder whether that might need some unraveling or not. I don't know whether we have the time to do the unraveling this evening, but I think that was, I guess that was endorsing what you were saying about how we refer to ourselves. And I guess in this time of Black Lives Matter and George Floyd, there is a debate about who we are, and what we call ourselves is pretty fundamental to who we are. So it's
exactly
what you're saying there is quite powerful.
You see, one of the things that whiteness does, whiteness pretends that it is not of race and that it's not of ethnicity, and that others are of race and of ethnicity and are ethnicized or racialized. And that's the biggest mistake that we make, yeah? Because we then see ourselves as providing the answers to our solutions. We cannot provide the answer to how they treat us. All we've got to do is to become economically powerful, because that is what they've done. And one of the things we therefore have to start doing, whether we wish to believe it or not, and whether we can achieve it, and I believe we can, we have to educate ourselves, to trust ourselves, and to unite. Because if we don't trust ourselves and unite, we will never achieve what we can achieve. That was part of the message for the movie Black Panther. We have got to start trusting ourselves. If we don't trust ourselves, we'll never be able to compete. I take you back to 1929, Black Wall Street, when on that night, how many thousands of or hundreds of property and hundreds of Black people were killed in the US, yeah? And no one person, not one white person, was ever charged. What they wanted to do then was to destroy any semblance of growth in the African American community that was going to compete with the white community. And that's what they did. So we've got to start trusting ourselves again and start competing. We have value. We have a massive economic base. The amount of money that we spend in white institutions, in white businesses, etc., we need to start spending it amongst ourselves. If we don't do that, they will continue to always be powerful over us.
I think there is something about what Dr. Gil is saying there about we have to have the confidence in our own self and our abilities and in who we are as individuals in order to make a contribution to what is going on out there. And I think we also need to be careful about the cultural taxation that can happen to individuals when we then become we will help, I guess, the dominant group to feel less guilty with their white privilege. I think we have to take responsibility for who we are as individuals, but we have to allow the dominant group to take responsibility for who they are and how they've contributed to the inequality that exists.
Exactly.
Because what we are finding in response to the current Black Lives Matter initiatives is that anyone who's not white is being asked to be the specialist, to be the contributor, to change, to alleviate the guilt that's being felt. And we have to be careful as individuals not to get caught up in that, because what you will find is that we will wear ourselves out and then the structure will continue, because as Audre Lorde says, the master will never give you the tools to dismantle the house. So then we have to create our own house and our own tools in order to then be independent.
Sorry to cut in. There's a couple of raised hands in the chat, so I'm quite keen to go to them. I'm also very conscious that we're getting close to 9:30, so I'm going to go to the two questions that we've got, and then Marcia, if we can make the announcement around the prize for the draw that people are entered into, and then we can draw things to a close. So I'm going to go. I don't have a sense as to who was first, so I'm going to go in order as they appear, and I'm going to go to Corvette. who I've seen on screen before. Clover, if you want to unmute your mic and maybe your camera as well. And if you have a question, it might be good if you can keep it as brief as you can, given the time that we've got. But over to you.
Hello, everybody. I want to say congratulations to Dr. Morgan. You might slightly know who I am, and if you don't, you'll find out real soon after you get off the call. But I thought it was very important for me to show up to support today. I did purchase the book. I haven't read it yet, but I'm looking forward to diving deep into it after this conversation. This conversation has been really rich. And I just wanted to add just a quick point that who you are matters. And this is, you know, in reference to Clover's question, how do we fix this?
Yeah.
Who you are matters. What you have to contribute is necessary. Listen to the beat of your own drummer and dance to the music that you hear. Nothing changes on the outside until we change inside. So to Dr. Morgan's poem, Who Am I? We have to find out who am I? And when I come to know who I am, then I will be able to show up more powerfully wherever I'm planted. There's a saying that goes, bloom where you're planted. So the society that we live in doesn't change based on the rules that are made outside. It's going to change when we come inside and find out who we are, and then walk like the princes and the kings and the queens that we are, because who I am changes the room when I show up. Who you are changes when you show up. So those outside of us won't fix the system. They made it. It's not going to change based on their agenda.
No.
We have to take our power into our own hands and deliver.
Corvette, you should have come into the conversation much, much earlier. Such a powerful contribution there. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Okay, Ren, I'm going to come to you now again. If you'd like to unmute your mic and make yourself visible on camera. Again, I'm going to ask you to be as brief as you can because we are running slightly short of time.
Hi everyone, I'd like to keep it short. Congratulations, Dr. Morgan, on your book launch. This has been a very interesting experience as a virtual book launch. I've never attended one before, so really happy to be here. I'm really proud of you for all the accolades that you've got, especially this book that I'm really looking forward to reading. My question is one that I feel like you did cover slightly briefly before, but I would like to see if you had anything further to add, as in a comparison between this, The Silenced Voice, compared to your first book, and how you think they compare for a reader. And a second point I had to ask was just about maybe your experience studying, as you've well know, you've got to a doctorate position through doing a lot of studying. So how have you found navigating your way through those institutions? Because as somebody who has an undergraduate degree myself, it's not the easiest process to do. Even I graduated last year, it's still not an easy thing to do as a young Black woman. So I just wanted to know what you had to say about that, and what you had to say about your second book compared to your first, as you are indeed an author now.
Okay, I guess both books talk about Black women's experience as being gendered and racialized in an organization such as the prison service. The second book compares the prison service to higher education to show that actually the prison service is no different to any other institution, because Black women's experience is based not on the institution that they work in, but their actual intersectionality of their gender and race. So whether you are in a prison service, in healthcare, in education, your lived experience will be based on the intersectionality of gender and race. The differences between both books is that one book is very, I guess, academic based, because it had to get that credibility. So it's based on my thesis, and although it's an easier read version of my thesis, and it's actually half the length of the actual doctorate thesis, it's still quite dense. But in order to get that credibility, it had to be that way. Plus, the first book was very much around or directed towards academics, those in colleges and in university, to use as a tool to understand gender and race issues from an organizational psychodynamic perspective, because it was very important to understand what organizations do in response to gender and racial differences. Because what we tend to find is that studies tend to either focus on gender and treat the organization as separate, when actually when they come together, there's a type of psychodynamic interaction that occurs. The second book, as I said earlier, was to get that emotional connection, to actually understand what it feels to be an intersectional subject in both those institutions, but show that regardless of the institution, a Black woman's experience will be similar because of the intersectionality of gender and race. The fact that the dominant group is white, patriarchal in these organizations will have a bearing on how you experience that particular organization. Balancing being an academic and a full-time, and being in full-time employment and being a mother as well. It's all about balancing and prioritizing. All three roles were important. My son was important, so I had to be a full-time mother. Being a full-time mother, you have to provide, you have bills to pay, so you have to make sure that you do well in your job. But also it was important that I would made Black women visible in prison occupation literature, because I worked in that organization and I wanted to be visible. I wanted other people to understand what it means to be Black and gendered in the prison service. And I was tired of being invisible. I'm one of those people that I don't want to just identify a problem. I want to present a solution. And that's what these books did. They presented a framework that other scholars after me can understand the interaction between the psychology, as in the organizations and what happens in the unconscious, but also how it responds to Black women as gendered and racialized subjects. So for me, it was important about prioritizing and balancing and staying focused and wanting to actually do something positive in making us visible.
Marcia, would you like to say?
I appreciate your contribution.
Pardon?
I said I appreciate your contribution. Thank you.
Okay, and we thank you, Ren, for coming on camera and asking your question as well. Marcia, we pretty much run out of time, so I wonder whether you would like to tell us a bit about who has won the competition. And then I guess my proposal is that we draw things to a close. I don't know, I mean, it feels like we're just getting going in the conversation. I don't know whether people want to be around after we finish the formal proceedings. I don't know whether that's possible with the call. I'm kind of open to do that, but maybe Marcia, if you go to the competition and who's going to be fortunate enough to be receiving a copy of the book.
Okay, so the competition, the winner can either have a copy of the book or they can have a 1 hour free coaching session with me. As I said, the answer is be inspired, stay focused, and fulfill your purpose. And the winner of that competition was Aisha Foster.
Okay, so Aisha, and I guess Aisha, perhaps if you can find a way of reaching out to Marcia directly. If you've got the book, then you may, and if you bought it from her directly, you'll have some contact detail for her. Then you would, I guess, can reach out and claim the prize that you would wish to claim, whether it's the book or the coaching. Speaking as somebody that's into coaching myself, I would absolutely recommend the coaching is something that you maybe look at as well. Okay, I am going to, Marcia, sorry, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted, just before you ended, there was just something that I wanted to share. So I guess it just kind of encapsulates and summarizes the whole purpose, or my purpose, of this whole journey of completing the doctorate. And it's from a young lady by the name of Awa, and she sent me this really long email. She took part in the competition, and what I want to share is that she shared what she got out of the word art and what it meant to actually know, I guess, me. And she said to me, one of the most important things about in that word art was the bit about tell your story, because even though it was one of the smallest texts, it was the most powerful thing for her, because it had much deeper meaning to her, because it reminded her of, or how I inspired her as being a Black woman, but also how her mother inspires her and how other Black females inspire her as a young Black female. and the voices that we have and the importance of being able to share our story and our messages. And that was just a really a message that touched me, because that was the whole point of me doing this, or going through this whole journey, was that young girls can actually be inspired to know that their voices are important. And because of this message, our wife, I believe you might be on, or you may be on with your mother, is that I'd like to send you a free copy of my book as well, because the fact that you was able to think differently and actually share how I have inspired you actually has inspired me to continue on this journey.
Okay, great. That's a very generous offer, and I'm sure that will be appreciated by the recipient. But so thanks, Marcia. I just want to say,
hi, this is Awa and I.
Okay.
We're here listening. I will say hello. Hello. Thank you, Marcia.
Okay, you're the person who's going to be receiving the book.
Awa will receive it. I will receive it. I will read it. But she's only 13, by the way.
Okay, so you're the person that sent the email.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thanks for being here. Better than Gogglebox, right?
Yes.
Most definitely. Much better than Gogglebox. Most definitely. Okay, if you don't mind, I'm just going to kind of draw things to a close properly, but stay on the line, because I think people will continue to talk afterwards as well. But I just want to say a big thanks to our guests, to Gil and to Chelsea and to Clover, particularly from being with us all the way in sunny Jamaica. Much better place to be than where we are at the moment. And we'll try and keep our COVID away from you so that you don't wind up like we're heading over here as well. Huge thanks to Marcia for being who she is and putting the book together and putting it out there as well. Huge thanks to all of you out there for being part of the event this evening and making it what it is today. As I say, I think I'm just going to close things down now. I guess if people want to stay on the line for a little while, that's going to be permissible. I'm Fitzroy Andrews. It's been my honor and privilege to host things this evening. Thank you for being around. Buy the book and stay safe. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fitzroy.
Thanks,
Well done.
Marcia.
Welcome. For those who's staying on, it would be nice if everyone could turn their cameras on and I could take
That sounds good to me.
Everyone.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Let's go to gallery view so we can maybe see who there is out there.
My hair.
Don't worry about your hair. You're here.
I'm like,
Not about your hair. It's about being here.
I was home.
Don't worry about that. You can be in your pajamas for all I care. No business.
You wouldn't want to see that.
Okay, are we ready?
All right, we've still got 30 odd people on the call, which is great. This is much better Friday evening entertainment. I mean, I don't need to lead things anymore necessarily. I think if anybody wants to take the conversation in a certain direction, I mean, we've rocked some serious science on here this evening, so there's lots to talk about, it seems. So whichever way you want to develop it, really.
Yeah.